Hello. Regardless of a possible ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel, today's world confronts a critical and urgent issue: how to hold Israel accountable for its inhumane aggression on Gaza. This is not just about politics or international relations. It is a matter of human lives, dignity and justice. The world has witnessed the devastating impact of the conflict on the people of Gaza, and it is a moral duty to explore ways to ensure accountability for the crimes being committed. Through the lenses of international law, human rights and ethics, we should examine the mechanisms and strategies that can lead to meaningful accountability and pave the way for just and lasting peace. Welcome to Press TV's Spotlight. I am Bahman Nurai, your host. Let's watch a short report first.
As the call for justice in Gaza resonates across the world, more countries are stepping forward to join South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice. In December 2023, South Africa filed a case at the International Court of Justice, stating that Israel is engaging in genocidal acts in Gaza.
This institutionalized impunity has led Israel to engage in this genocide, which has shocked the conscience of humanity. South Africa is mindful that the present genocide operates in denial of the Palestinian people's inalienable right to self-determination and collective right to return to their homes in Palestine.
Also, last January, the ICJ ruled that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent genocide in Gaza.
Israel must also take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention.
The interim ruling has set a precedent for international legal action against human rights violations. Meanwhile, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has called for arrest warrants for Israeli leaders implicated in crimes committed against Palestinians, including those in the Gaza Strip.
Today, I'm filing applications for warrants of arrest before Pretrial Chamber 1 of the International Criminal Court in the situation in the State of Palestine.
As the Israeli regime's crimes continue to draw condemnation around the globe, 14 countries, including Ireland and Cuba, have expressed their intention to join South Africa's case against Israel at the ICJ. This while truce talks between Hamas and Israel are expected to end up in a deal soon. Now these questions remain to be answered. How can justice be served given Israeli officials' defiance of court rulings? And in case a truce is reached in Gaza, will efforts continue to hold the Israeli criminals accountable?
Welcome back. Allow me to introduce my guest in this episode of Spotlight. Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol, UK. And Mick Napier, co-founder of Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign from Glasgow. Gentlemen, very good to have you on the programme. Tony, I'm going to start with you. We know that Cuba has officially declared its intention to join South Africa's case against Israel. That makes the tally up to like 14 countries now. Do you think this is going to gain momentum now? How is it going to change the game?
Well, let me try and put this in context, because the last real mass slaughter based around religion that we saw was during the Second World War. People have been comparing the treatment of the Palestinian, mostly Muslims, many Christians and others though, to the Nazi treatment of the Jews. This idea that really encompasses is the separation of people. So we are the Übermensch and they are the Untermensch, the under people, the animals. This is exactly the sort of language the Nazis were using back in the 1930s and 1940s against Jews, Slavs, and other minority groups such as Gypsies. So we have to understand where this concept comes from. Obviously, it goes back a long, long way. But in Germany, particularly, it was the philosopher Nietzsche in the end of the 19th century that wrote a book called Also Spake Zarathustra. And this idea of the Übermensch and the Untermensch is key to understanding how a society can deliberately, and a state can deliberately condition its people to think of human beings as animals and treat them so terribly. So that's the context. But back in, and I'm quite positive about the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice and what they're doing, even though, of course, the wheels of justice turn painfully slowly. It took, back in the Second World War, it took 10 years, even a bit more than 10 years, to actually finally bring the war criminals of Nazi Germany, the SS, etc., to justice. One or two of them did escape, that's true, but the Nuremberg tribunals in 1946 did. Now, what we're seeing now is the wheels of justice, even just after a year, less than a year, in fact, the process has begun. And let me just take my hat off to the Hind Rajab Foundation and their ability to get together the evidence, much of which has been shared through really disgusting videos posted by Israeli Defense Force soldiers online, really mocking the people that they're killing in an absolutely disgusting fashion. But they've taken many of those videos and footage at the Hind Rajab Foundation and presented them to the International the International Court of Justice as evidence. And we're now looking at 50 specific soldiers with specific evidence of war crimes that they've committed, not just those in charge in Tel Aviv.
Right, Tony. Mick, Tony just mentioned the Hind Rajab Foundation. That was part of the question that I wanted to pose for you. Can you tell me what's the significance of the acts of the Hind Rajab Foundation? We know that they successfully managed to get an Israeli soldier imprisoned, in jail, at least for now, in Brazil, arrested for now. And they are now campaigning for another arrest of a major general in Italy. How do you think is the significance of this? And is this going to continue while now that there's a talk of a ceasefire deal?
I mean, it's tremendously significant. In the past, we have seen, I think it was 2008, an Israeli war criminal, Doron Almog, landed at Heathrow Airport in London. And the police were waiting for him with handcuffs, because a magistrate had issued an arrest warrant for his war crimes in Gaza. Now, he was tipped off and the plane took off and he didn't end up behind bars. But there have been many examples of this, where magistrates responding to pressure, responding to over a compelling case that an individual has committed war crimes, have issued arrest warrants. And the Israelis, for a while, warned their citizens against travelling to Spain. They warned many of them about the risks of travelling to Britain. Tzipi Livni, an ex-diplomat, had to hide. She came over to speak to a Zionist meeting, the Jewish National Fund in London, and she had to skip it because she was afraid of arrests. So the threat of arrests has been there for a while, and it was good to see the warrant issued in Brazil for the Israeli soldier. The information I have, perhaps you've got more up-to-date information, is that he was allowed to escape by sections of the Brazilian military and is now in Argentina. But the fact is, the issuing of that arrest warrant, that civil society groups like the Hind Rajab Foundation show us what is possible. Over the last 20 years, we've seen the growth of the BDS movement. That is self-organised groups in civil society taking it upon themselves to take action to boycott and isolate the State of Israel. A comparable movement dedicated to gathering intelligence on Israeli citizens, because as your other guest says, they boast about, they make videos of their war crimes, of their atrocities, of their degenerate behaviour. So there's a mountain of information out there on social media. If we can find the organisations, 1,000 examples of the Hind Rajab Foundation, people who follow that inspiration to get arrest warrants issued for Israelis wherever they travel, it could make a huge difference, because they have enjoyed impunity, they have faced arrest. When Doron Almog faced arrest in Britain, Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, apologised to Israel for the inconvenience he had suffered and guaranteed it wouldn't happen again. But it still can happen. There are technical reasons why it can. So very inspiring from Hind Rajab, very inspiring in Brazil. And I think if it can be copied, it can make a substantial difference, because we cannot rely on the heads of governments to pursue Israel, apart from the 14 who've already taken this stand.
Right. Now, Tony, we know that during the genocide in the past 15 months, the international community has failed enormously in containing the genocide, containing the Israeli atrocities in Gaza. Now, with all the talk and the hype about the possible truce that is going to happen maybe in the next hours or so, what do you think? Of course, the Israelis want everything to die down, everything to be swept under the carpet. But do you think this will be the case, or there will be justice now?
Well, look, let's take the previous so-called ceasefire agreements as examples. They were jumped on by the far-right bloc now controlling Israel, which I must say does not represent Israeli people as a whole. There is a lot of support for them, obviously, in Israel, but there are many, many people in civil society that don't support this. And what they're doing really is trying very hard to get their way with these specific individuals. But I mean, if you look at the wider, sorry, I'm going back again to look at the bigger picture. I think it's important to understand what's going on. You've got Josh Paul today, a former senior official at the US State Department, actually quoting him saying that the war, Israel's war in Gaza, is made in America. So this is what I'm saying about the ceasefire, is that this is crucial. Trump coming in now with a new administration, with a whole bunch of new officials, they will be absolutely key, but there's no guarantees that they are going to want what the rest of the world wants, which is to see this slaughter finish. So that's the picture. There's many people, including, for example, Jeffrey Sachs, very well-respected Jewish economist, and well, he's become a political advisor in the United States, also calling out the Middle East situation as really made in America. And I would remind you, it's interesting to hear, I didn't know that this Israeli soldier in Brazil had found some sort of safe haven in Argentina, because we know, anybody that's looked into this, the British that looked into it, even the World in Action documentary program back in the 1970s found many ex-SS, ex-Nazis hiding in Argentina, because Argentina was a perfect place, Patagonia being very German, lots of Nazi sympathizers in Argentina. And now, of course, we've got what you would call anarcho-capitalist government in Argentina. This is the sort of place which will help to hide somebody like that. So the links to the Nazis, I think, are really important to understand. If you go back all that way, you'll find many of the Nazis fled to the United States. So it shouldn't come as a great surprise that we're seeing the United States backing this. Really, the only big question over this ceasefire is, are they going to do the same as they did in the previous ceasefires and use them as just an excuse, a cynical excuse, to using electronic means, tracing phones and things like this, to kill, destroy, maim the people that they're supposed to be negotiating with, as we saw with Nasrallah in Beirut. They're absolutely disgusting. And the UN, they had announced that there was about to be a peace deal, and then what did we see? The Israelis and the United States coordinating their satellite intelligence to assassinate Nasrallah. And that's happened many times in these negotiations. So all I'd say is, don't hold your breath.
Right, Tony, you mentioned we should look at the other examples, other possible scenarios, ceasefire scenarios that we've had, which reminds me of what happened between Israel and Lebanon. At least in Lebanon, there is the Lebanese army to oversee the enforcement of the ceasefire. And despite that, we are seeing daily violations by the Israeli forces in Lebanon, killing people, still killing people there, and staying there and just ignoring the ceasefire practically. Who is going to be the body who's going to oversee the enforcement of a possible ceasefire in Gaza? And if there will be any violations, who is going to hold them accountable for them?
Sorry, you asked? No.
For Mick. I'm asking Mick, yeah.
Okay. Well, the agreement is to be overseen by the governments of Egypt, Qatar, and the USA. So one has to be extremely cautious, because the Egyptian government they've held their noses for the last few years, but they have also worked with Israel to enforce the siege of Gaza. So the question of agency that you raise is absolutely central. There is no agency that one could have confidence in, and you know, Israel and America work as virtually inseparable partners, and sometimes they disagree about minor details, but they're virtually inseparable partners. So how this is going to go forward, Israel will remain the local most technologically advanced military superpower, but, and it's a huge but, they have failed to defeat the Palestinian resistance. And this is absolutely crucial. The fact that even though they hold many of the cards going forward, the absolute determination, the courage, the heroism of the Palestinian resistance has denied them their main war aim, which was to obliterate that resistance. And it's worth saying many, many times over, in unconventional war such as this, for the dominant colonial or colonizing power to win, they need to obliterate resistance. They've failed. For the opposition, for the resistance to win, they don't have to conquer territory, they merely have to survive. They have to hang on. They have to deny victory to the opposition. And by any conventional military yardstick, Israel has not secured its goals. It has caused tremendous suffering across Gaza. I think they've obliterated 85 or 87% of buildings. They've caused huge suffering until now and going forward, but they have not won. And that's what is very important for Israel. So I think that there is no reliable agency to enforce this. The only thing which will keep the Israelis from violating it at will is the knowledge that they cannot win and that there will be a cost to pay. And I have to say this as well. For many, many years, well before October 2023, up until the present day, the Palestinians have won one of the most important battles, which is the battle for worldwide public opinion. Even before Operation Al-Aqsa flood, Israel was a polecat state, was very, very unpopular, even among the populations of their main allies, Britain, America, Germany, and so on. But since Operation Al-Aqsa flood, over the last 16 months, Israel has reached what they understand to be a crisis, that the intensity of the hostility towards Israel has reached such a pitch that they're quite worried about it. And Trump will not be prepared to pay a heavy political price to protect Israel. His pro-Israel policy has been bought by Sheldon Adelson's widow for $250 million to his campaign fund. So he's totally in the Zionist camp. But I don't think he's a reliable ally, because he's quite capricious and quite willing to play to his base, which is not by any means very sympathetic to Israel.
Tony, Israel is claiming that the ICC has no jurisdiction over it. Is such a claim enough to get rid of any legal pursuit?
Well, it's the sort of claim that the Nazi Germany would have made in the Second World War against international justice. I mean, basically, what they're saying is the law does not apply to us. They are the men of lawlessness. That's who they are running Israel right now. They're not interested in the rule of law. They're interested in the power coming from the barrel of a gun or possibly a nuclear weapon, which they try to deny that they still have. And I think it's quite crucial to understand that the way that the Israelis have managed over the years to infiltrate and to influence the mass media. I mean, I myself used to work for the BBC in London, and I've seen over the years a gradual change in their attitude over the years towards Israel. Very sceptical to begin with during, for example, the first Gulf War back in 1990. Quite good historical background coverage. Very little now. But the mainstream media, mainly led by the Murdoch empire, who have big financial interests, have been extremely powerful in trying to, and I think this has been betrayed in a way over the Christmas holiday by Rafi Berg, who's at the BBC as a former worker with the CIA front organisation, now as their online Middle East editor. We're starting to see people within the mass media, even in the Western world, start to call out those Zionist agents who are working within the media. And if you remember the pager explosions back in October 2024, the agents came out on CBS News and they said, all the world is our stage. That's what they said. And that's because what they're betraying there is their massive influence over the Western press. They've got their people in who are basically controlling the narrative as it comes out day after day. For example, a former Labour MP has been arrested in Britain here for trying to procure, in a sexual manner, schoolboys in Brighton over the last few days. Virtually no coverage on the television or the radio, a little bit in the newspaper. And that's the sort of influence that they have, because they know that this is the way that you control the population, simply by trying to squash any story which is negative about the Zionists. And that's another thing is this. I think this is really, really important. Is you've got a home front as well. So over the Christmas break, we had a massive campaign all over the BBC about the 2005 7/7 London bombings, trying to blame the whole thing. So all these Muslims, they're terrible, they're blowing up London. Well, I can tell you, the actual blame seems to be on an Israeli company being run in London at the time who put bombs underneath the trains, not inside the trains. So they're trying to push this whole agenda. We've got a massive home front, is what I'm saying here, in the UK. And slowly but surely, people are realising, hey, we're being had here, and this is all very bad, I think, ultimately, for the Israeli state. We're pushing them against the wall now. Right,
Tony. Now, Mick, as we discussed, the arrest warrants is one thing, and a real trial and conviction is a totally different matter. How do you think is that going to happen? What steps should be taken to actually bring the people in charge of the genocide, people who are running the genocide, to justice?
I think it depends entirely upon the kind of effective pressure that can be built up from below in our societies against the likes of the UK government and Starmer. Because we have seen Ireland, we have seen Belgium, we have seen Spain join South Africa with 10 other countries in their case at the International Court. Having said that, there is tremendous resistance to this going to the court and being successful. We know that our governments work very, very closely with the Israelis. They know exactly what Israel has been doing. They have in the past actually almost endorsed, not quite, but when British or American citizens have been killed by the Israeli military, shot dead when they're protecting Palestinian school children, the governments have been on the side of Israel against their own citizens. So that determined support for Israel is still there, but it comes up against increasingly determined support among the population. And if I can sound one note of optimism, the reason why people in Britain are now being sent to prison, are being jailed and fired from their jobs for supporting Palestine, is because our elites know that they have lost the debate. If they had won the debate, if our opinions were marginal, they would ignore us. But the jailings, the legislation going through Congress for a £1 million fine, for a 10-year sentence, for campaigning for BDS against Israel,
thank you, Mick.
Several signs that they've lost the debate.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure to have you in the programme. We are pressed for time. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Once again, Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol, UK, and also Mick Napier, co-founder of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, joining us from Glasgow. This was another Spotlight. Thank you for watching.